Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cop Talk. I'm Kevin Schroeder, your host. I'm here with my co-host, Captain Ed Mamet. Say hello, Ed.
Hello, ABC viewers and listeners. Today we have a very interesting roundtable that I think you'll all enjoy.
So today's roundtable we'll be speaking about 9/11. Our first guest is Jeannie Kelly, retired police officer, and is involved with the Mount Sinai program for 9/11 program, outreach program. And also Dan Wiese, who is the retired colonel from New York State Police Department. And on that day, 9/11, both these guests were very involved in that particular day. Now, Jeannie, welcome. Dan, welcome.
Thank you.
Please give everyone a little bit of your background. We could start with you, Jeannie.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be back with you both again. Yes, I retired in 2005 out of the County Terrorism Division in Brooklyn after 24 wonderful years of service. I signed on with Homeland Security as a county terrorism instructor for the Center for Domestic Preparedness for several years, and then signed on at Mount Sinai as their outreach coordinator with the World Trade Center Health Program. Subsequent to that, I now work with Matt McCauley at Turk and Heath and McCauley. Matt's also retired NYPD, lobbied down in D.C. to get the legislation for the James Zadroga Health and Compensation Act signed. So Matt does specific to victims' compensation registrations and benefits and helping the responders and their families. And I do all the outreach and registering members of the department and other agencies, active or retired, with the World Trade Center Health Program.
Thank you, Jeannie. Colonel?
Thank you. Thanks for being here. And thanks for reuniting me with Jeannie. To the New York State Police, Jeannie's known as Saint Jeannie for the work that she's done for all of our members of the state police. It's just unheard of, and it's great. I spent 27 and a half years with the New York State Police, various different positions. I retired in 2004. Obviously, it was at 9/11 that day, which is very vivid memories for all of us. It's great to be back with you guys, and we look forward to a good discussion again today, especially with Jeannie's end of things.
All right. Now, on 9/11, Jeannie, where were you when the attack happened?
At the time, I was assigned to the police academy, but didn't work in the building. I was in specialized training, and I was scheduled to be in the confines of the 17th precinct for primary day for the afternoon session. I had made a donation to roll call to have the morning session, but by the grace of God, it would look in my favor. I was scheduled for the afternoon. After I saw the first and second plane hit on the news, after I dropped my kids off for school, I grabbed my uniform, contacted my sergeant, and she already was on her way into Manhattan, telling me to meet her in the city. So got down there, and finally, in the chaos and confusion, my brother was also a police officer. He worked in Manhattan traffic. We came out of the same academy class, and word was that he was missing, that he made a right where the guys in his unit made a left. So we finally found him 14 hours later at the East River Drive in the Pathmark Shopping Center, setting up a triage. Continue to work down there with no days off, working 15, 16-hour days, face-to-face relief for several months, and everything from working at the site itself, in the disaster site, at the pile, escorts of family members of many of our guys that were killed that day and other victims, brought in some equipment and transported a lot of the food and water and some of the medical personnel that were coming off the site to get back up to the Javits Center. So I believe my last time there was in March of 2002. So from September 11th of 2001 right through to at least the last day in March of 2002 is when most of the members of my unit were assigned, from site security, traffic posts, vehicle checkpoint searching for IEDs, and so forth. So there are many, many, many tasks and many, many memories. And being that it's coming up the anniversary, it's in a very emotional time for many of us.
Colonel?
That morning, I was a rare day home. Governor Pataki was here in the city, and I'm traditionally with him 99% of the time. I, again, had a trooper drive from the governor's house to my house and said to me, we need to turn on the television. We turned it on, so the second plane hit the tower. We then said, we got to get to the city. We were told the city roads were blocked. I called aviation. I said, listen, I need a helicopter. They said, no, everything's been grounded. Can't have a helicopter. I said, well, that's a little silly. These things are blue and gold, and they say state police all over them. send the helicopter. So it picked us up at Westchester Grasslands Hospital. Gary Berwick and myself flew us down to meet up with the governor. And my initial thoughts were, Governor, we have to go to our bunker in Albany. And one of the rare occasions that the governor and I disagreed about something, and he said, no, we have to be here. So after a brief discussion, I realized he was right. We did need to be here. So we left his apartment, made our way down to 633 3rd Avenue, where he obviously was immediately in contact with everybody right up to the president, the mayor, and we carried on from there. And myself and our team, we went down to Ground Zero later that day. We had the governor's daughter with us even, Emily. We were walking in, ashes up to our knees, obviously, viewing the site. And we continued to rent hotels to bring the troopers down. We had as many as 800 troopers down here in the next couple of days and continued to work nonstop straight through. I think the first week that we actually took any time off was Christmas Eve to try to get somewhat of a normality. My cousin's husband was Lieutenant NYPD. He passed. He was one of the first bodies to be discovered. And the first funeral that took place on Long Island, I helicoptered out to Long Island. I was in shock with the amount of American flags everywhere. It was such a moving experience to see American flags on everyone's house. Just a real patriotic feeling for this country. And we hope someday we'll get that feeling back. We really do. But like Jeannie said, it's always a tough day for all of us here at this round table because we're all part of this. And we have our 23rd anniversary of the memorial Governor Pataki puts on every year. This year it's at the at New York Athletic Club. And again, Jeannie will be with us, and I believe you guys will be there as well. So,
Captain?
Well, I was retired 2 years when this happened. I was out at the polls. You mentioned, Jeannie, election day. It was primary day. And I was at the location for primary day to vote. And I remember there was a problem voting. I had to use a paper ballot. Something got messed up. And while I was there, I heard the radio of the assigned police officer start blaring, but I couldn't make it out. And I figured it must be a cop in trouble because it sounded like that. Whenever a cop's in trouble, you get that pandemonium radio. So I walk upstairs and I'm walking back to my apartment. And I live only about a mile from the World Trade Center, so my back was facing it. And I hear a guy on a phone talking about how he was standing near the building when the plane hit. So I said to myself, "What's he talking about?" So I turn around and I see the smoke coming up from the crash location. So I went upstairs, and the first thing I did is call my son because I know that he comes in from Jersey and to the World Trade Center station. So I couldn't reach him because all the phones were out. Then I turned on the TV and I saw the second plane hit. So I'm very friendly with the owner of the Tribeca Grill, and I called him and I was supposed to meet with him. And I said, "Listen, I can't meet." He says, "I can't either." He says, "I'm stuck in New Jersey." He said that he asked me if I could go down and check out the site and see what's going on. So I went down there, and I was shocked that in front of his restaurant was a pile of wood stretchers to carry dead people. And there was a coating on the floor of about 1.5 inches of white dust. And I said to him, I said, "Look, there's no way you can open the restaurant." So then he calls me back and he says, "Well, listen, there's a lot of food in the refrigerator. Maybe you can get into it and feed the workers." So we got emergency service to cut open the refrigerator, and we started feeding the people at the pile, and that became a regular thing. I got very involved with the feeding, and this went on for about 5 weeks or so. And there was a lot of retired guys like me down there, and that was my exposure to the problem.
Well, actually, my own story is on 9/11, I was RDO, and NYPD world means regular day off. However, the night before, midnight going into 8 a.m. on, 9/11, I was working, volunteering for a campaign, someone running for mayor. And so we worked through the night with the Political Action Committee, and everyone else. And once I found out, I was on my way home, actually, and I was going to go home and come back in for the primary go we had an event at the Sheraton for the candidate that was running. But before I got home, it was maybe like 9 a.m. Right before 9 a.m., I was informed that the first plane had hit. So I was on my way home. At the time, I lived upstate. My wife was a nurse. We actually had a newborn. My daughter Mackenzie was only 2 months old. My son Kevin was 4 years old. And I got home and I said to my wife Heidi, we put everything on, we put the TV on, and we're watching what's going on. And of course, the cell phone's going off, the beep is going off. Everyone's all hands, which I didn't have to be asked to come back in. I'm coming back in. I just wanted to make sure that Heidi's situated, my wife and the kids are situated. We had to get my son Kevin out of kindergarten, and went back into the city. At that time, you couldn't just drive over to GW Bridge. You had to wait. Like maybe every 20 minutes, the Port Authority police would bring, first responders over. They weren't just allowing traffic to go over to George Washington Bridge. What's going on? And again, we still didn't have all the facts. We just know 2 planes hit. The buildings came down. Now I'm at Midtown North Precinct. I was assigned to the detective squad. Now this is about 11:30 in the morning on 9/11. I'm back in the precinct. And basically what they did with the detectives, they put us in uniform and they assigned us to all the hospitals at that first day on 9/11 to make sure that there's, no missing persons, because the people are just going to be scattering, going to hospitals. People could be, getting sick or dying in the hospitals, and they're unidentified. So they wanted anyone coming into any hospitals, they wanted the detectives to register them, take control, get their information, and report it. And this went on for about a week, 12-hour tours. However, after my first 12-hour tour, me and a couple of other buddies, Joe Murray being one of them, which we all know, Jeannie, we worked with Joe, and a few other guys from Midtown North Precinct. We went down on our own, and tried to help out whatever we could do on the pile, on our own time. For a couple of days, we did that. And then they started assigning detectives to the morgue, the morgue down by Bellevue. And also a few months later, maybe 3 or 4 months later, when all the debris, they started bringing everything down out to Fresh Kill in Staten Island, they made a crime scene, so it was only detectives they wanted out there. And of course, myself being a detective, every week, at least once a week, if not more, we went out there 12, 14-hour days. We were out there in Fresh Kill, where prior to that, they had shut down Fresh Kill because I think the ground was bubbling, so they shut it down, But now they opened it up again for us to be out there with. They didn't even have the right proper gear when we first went out there, and of course, no one cared. We just did what we had to do when we were out there. And I know I spent months out there, and I know guys spent even much more than my time out there. With me, around late October, I caught a homicide. A body was found in a basket, DOA wrapped up in a carpet. So now I'm dealing with the homicide from Midtown North, as well as back and forth going out to Fresh Kill. So it was back and forth. You have the family calling me, what's going on with my relative's homicide, which we worked on. We wound up making 2 collars on it, closing the case out 6 months later. Maybe we could have done a little sooner, but everybody was busy with 9/11, which was, also a priority as well. And of course, I understand the family, their priority. They had a relative who was killed, murdered. But yeah, that was my day on 9/11, and but that day, my office, 10 guys jumped in 2 cars, went down there. They were down there for the buildings to come down. One of our guys had a heart attack. Thank God he survived. And another guy, he had passed since 9/11, but Sergeant Jerry Bayrod actually, went under a truck, and it turned out an ESU truck, I guess, everyone's getting away from the building, ran over his leg. They put him on a boat. He wound up in a hospital in Jersey. We didn't even know he was there for a couple of days. And then later on, he had died from cancer from 9/11. So that's my story for 9/11. And everyone has a story. It's unfortunate. Every time I think back, and you're right, Dan, Colonel, you're right. It's just everyone came together that day, and it lasted maybe a year or so. But unlike today, it's totally different. I mean, it's sad. What does it take? 2 more buildings to come down and 3,000, 6,000 people to die for everyone to come together today? It's a shame. And as you know, Jeannie, I mean, we know that day 3,000 people died. And since that day, 5, 6, 7 times of that, many people have died, not only law enforcement, but also civilians. Which brings me to the next issue is, Jeannie, you're very involved with the program, the 9/11 program, Mount Sinai. You've been, you're doing God's work. You've been doing God's work from day one, as the Colonel said. So true, not only with the state troopers, but with NYPD and actually the rest of the country. And there's so many guys and girls who came that day to help out, who went back home to Alabama, who went back home to Chicago, who have no idea about the program. And unfortunately, getting sick and have no idea. They're not getting the, everything that the everything they need, what's available to them through the program. All their compensations and medical bills maybe help them get paid through this program. However, they're unaware of it. And I hope, with this program and other programs, and I know you and the Colonel getting the word out there, but we really need to get the word out there to all these people who came in that day and did God's work as well that day, and maybe weeks after stayed and paid out of their own pocket for hotels, and they went home and they have no idea about this program or what's available to them, the resources.
Yeah, what I'd like to say is that I was amazed by the number of police from other jurisdictions that responded. I mean, they came from as far as California. I remember one particular group, they, without authorization, they were in the Midwest, they jumped into a department car and came to New York, lights and sirens all the way, and they were picking up state police escorts from each state they went through. And they stayed, and there were people from Chicago directing traffic on Canal Street. I mean, you saw a plethora of uniforms. And a lot of these people were exposed because they were down there, and they probably don't know about the program. So we're trying to get the word out nationwide, worldwide, about the program that Jeannie's involved in. So that's very important.
So, Jeannie, if you could, speak on behalf of this conversation in regards to the benefits for, all the first responders, that would be great.
And the new change, there's been a change in the amount, what's being covered.
So the most recent change is the ovarian cancer that was added, that had not been on the list previously, that was added last January. Medical conditions that are covered or based on a presumption on the exposure is they list them in category: upper respiratory, the runny nose, the stuffy nose, the postnasal drip, the sinus infections, pulmonary, asthma, reactive airway disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, acid reflux, GERD, and part of the gastro. So think upper respiratory, low respiratory, gastro, and sleep apnea. Every single cancer right now that you can imagine, from blood cancers to organ cancers, are now presumed to be caused by the exposure of working, whether you were there officially or volunteered. And based on the outreach, and that's all a matter of what I do is outreach. Outreach means you got to be out. So there are responders that came into New York City to support the rescue, recovery, and cleanup operations, officially and unofficially. I have construction workers from Idaho that watched it on TV, felt compelled to come to New York City to help out, jumped in their private car, stopped at Home Depot, picked up cases of water, boots, and gloves, drove as far south into where the disaster site was at Ground Zero, found the first cop or firefighter, gave it the supplies, and jumped on the pile. Worked down there for 3 days, slept in their cars, and then drove home and know nothing about these registrations and the benefits that they provide. So we do have responders from every state in the 50 states of the Union that came into New York City, from police, fire, EMS, construction workers, the volunteers from the American Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and then federal, state, and local agencies. So law enforcement, the largest contingency nationally, as far as also with the NYPD and the fire departments. It's a matter of getting the information out through this program and other platforms to educate and give the information related to the eligibility. So what is the eligibility? A minimum of 4 hours between 9/11 and 9/14 in any combination. 24 hours for the month of September in any combination, or 80 hours or more between 9/11 and July 31 of 02. Canal Street is the threshold for what is designated as the official disaster site. South to the tip of Manhattan, river to river, Ground Zero, the temporary morgues, the Staten Island landfill, the barge loading piers, and the morgue located at 30th and 1st Avenue. Now, when I do outreach and I'm trying to educate or get the word out, there are folks that tell me that they think they're taking away in these benefits with these registrations from people who are sick or folks that they may know who have passed away. So these registrations were stood up in regards to the World Trade Center Health Program as a monitoring program. You don't have to be sick. And as far as the legislation that for these two registrations, which is the September 11 Victims Compensation Fund, which is the other federal registration under the James Adroga Health and Compensation Act, by the grace of God, they've been reauthorized until the year 2090. And there is no deadline for me to register anyone in the program. So to get the information out to these agencies and or jurisdictions, or to get the folks out, is platforms like this and other ways to inline organizations like the FOPs, the 1013 clubs, the fire associations, and so forth. But there are an estimated, based on what we think as far as the numbers of folks that were exposed from that day and the days and weeks after, at least 500,000 people. Right now in the World Trade Center Health Program, both for the responders and the survivors, and like Kevin mentioned, those are the folks that lived, worked, or went to school. The kids are in school that day and that went back to work after Lower Manhattan reopened on the 17th of September of '01. Those are also in addition to. So right now there's about 145,000 people registered nationally and in New York in the World Trade Center Health Program. So I have another 360,000 people to find. And we don't know who has passed away of 9/11 related cancers, if you will. And the families have no idea of these registrations on the benefits. And every single day I am getting calls, and I have two cell phones. There's a personal cell phone and a work cell phone. I average at least 3 calls a day of folks that are not registered in the program that have been just diagnosed with cancer and need to have the registrations done.
I mean, it's true. I mean, so many guys, I don't want to say so many guys, but definitely a handful of guys and girls have called me up and said to me, hey, Kev, we just start talking about their health issues. And I said, listen, I said, one particular case, a guy has cancer. And I said, well, I know you were down at 9/11. You registered with the program? Nah, I went once. And then I connected with Jeannie, and she's done great work to get them registered and put them in the right direction to get what needs to be done. And this way they have the resources they need and they deserve.
Kevin, I have one I just ran across. I think it was April of this year. I was at my place in Florida, and a friend of mine called me. I hadn't heard from him in years, but I've known him for 3 decades. Ken Tanner. He was a boat captain for the Mack family, David Mack, Earl Mack, and I've known him quite well. His brother, Michael Tanner, died. He worked for Cantor Fitzgerald, died. He called me the second day, I guess it was September 12th, and said, listen, my brother was in the towers. I'm driving up. I said, well, stay in touch. As soon as you get here, let us know. So we brought him into the state police inner circle. Obviously, he was frantic, trying to find his brother. He got active in everything for about 2 weeks and didn't think anything of it. Now, he picks me up that day in Florida to drop me at the airport. He says, let me come by. He says, I'm headed to the airport. We'll spend a half an hour together. He's got COPD so bad. I said, Ken, are you in this program? He says, well, what do you mean? I don't qualify for the program. I said, are you kidding me? Of course you qualify for the program. I happened to have in my bag that day when he drove me to the airport my Trelegy inhaler and my Combivent inhaler. I had just picked up before I left New York. Hadn't opened them. I left them with him. He told me he's spending $700 a month for just those 2 prescriptions, and he couldn't afford them. His COPD is that bad, and he's been in several times. Fortunately, he's in a Mount Sinai doctor in Florida, just happenstance. So what did I do? I called Jeannie's office, spoke to Tracy, and she's one of the people that does the backgrounds and so forth. And she said, by all means, let me call him. So they're now actively working to put him into the program. They asked if we had affiants. I said, not only did I have affiants, I had guys assigned to help Ken get in and out each day as he was coming in and out. And he lived in Jersey with his mom, while he was here, and his family. And he's now actively going to go through this program, but I think we found him just under the wire here because he didn't know he was entitled to anything. So there's a perfect example right there. Mm-hmm. But as we move this along, I'd like to, if we could, talk for a minute about the members that have died, whose wives and husbands are now forced to carry on their fight because state employees don't have the same benefits that city employees have. And now that they've passed away, and in many cases, I'm sure Jeannie can talk to this much better than I can, we had a mandate in this state where anybody that died during the COVID timeframe, their death certificate says COVID. which is nuts. These people didn't die of COVID. They died of these illnesses and just happened to die during that time frame. So it didn't matter if a car fell on you while you were working on your car.
Right.
And a death certificate says you died of COVID.
Exactly.
Which is crazy. But now we have wives fighting for their spouses to get what they're entitled to. And I'm sure Jeannie knows more about this than I do, for sure. But that's something we have to come together as a group and try to, straighten that out in the state. I know Governor Hochul said she was going to look at these things during her campaign efforts, but nothing's been done. And it's just something that just can't continue. It really can't. These people died of, not COVID, they died of 9/11 connected illness.
So there's many cases they're still saying it's from COVID. They haven't been overturned to 9/11?
So the case is, as you can imagine, in the work I do, I become intimately close, and I affectionately refer to them as my responders. And when I do outreach, I always want the wives to be a part of this process, because I affectionately refer to them as the wizards behind the curtain. Because when the guys in police and fire, generally, we're not doctor people. We go to work sick, we self-medicate, we live in denial, or we just learn to live with it. State police and the pension system, they don't have unlimited sick like we have in the NYPD. So they bank their sick leave so that when they do retire, it goes towards their medical benefit package. And in regards to a state trooper and Troop K Zone Sergeant, and I can mention the name because the family has allowed me to share that name, and that's Zone Sergeant James Sweeney. Jimmy worked in Troop K. I registered him in the program. He had 2 different types of cancers that were certified by the program, and was in active treatment for one, and then developed some other medical conditions consistent to his exposure. I get a call from Noreen that Jimmy passed away. Now, I said I didn't know that Jimmy passed away, but she told me that and I thought he was doing fine medically. She said, no, he couldn't breathe. We took him to Vassar Hospital in Poughkeepsie, and they diagnosed him with COVID. They intubated him, and he died 3 days later. Now, when it comes to benefits from the state pension and also for NYPD and other agencies, even with the federal government, the death certificate is what is indicative for a covered condition. A covered condition being what's on the list, if you will, with the World Trade Center Health Program. COVID is not a 9/11 illness. So when I asked Noreen for a copy of the death certificate, sure enough, the cause of death was COVID. Now, the first time I had to do this was pretty alarming, but I've never done that before. But I knew how important the line of duty death designation would be for Noreen for benefits, including his pension and the medical benefits from the state. So I asked for permission to speak to the ME who signed the death certificate. And she said yes. So it took me 17 calls to get to the ME. I explained to the ME, who knows me from no one, who I am, what I do, and the fact that he signed a death certificate. Did you know that James Sweeney was a zone sergeant with the state police and was officially deployed to support rescue recovery operations at Ground Zero? No, I did not know that. Did you know that James Sweeney also had certifications for 2 9/11 related cancers? And I have the appropriate correspondence from the World Trade Center Health Program and the pathology reports to suggest that. No, I did not know that. What I explained to him was that the fact that COVID is not a 9/11 illness, and it is an illness that's not related to a benefit for his wife, Noreen, that I was requesting respectfully if he would consider amending the death certificate. The reason being, had James not had these 2 other medical conditions, he may have survived COVID. That was a true statement based on medical and scientific information from what we were learning about COVID. I explained to him that James's name would go on the wall up in Albany at their police academy as a line of duty death. His name would also go on the wall up in Albany at the Empire Memorial, which is the state memorial. And then ultimately his name would be on the wall down in D.C. for the National Police Memorial, because they were now recognizing police officers and firefighters that were dying of 9/11 related illnesses as a line of duty death. There were also other benefits that would go to Noreen, but more for the recognition that their loved one did not die in vain. There was a very long pause on the phone, and I was shaking in this conversation because I knew how important it was to Noreen and her family. The physician responded that I'd never amended a death certificate before. So in my mind, the cop in me kicks in, and I'm saying, no, that's not a no, I'm still in the game. So I said, well, if I can find another physician that knows how to amend the death certificate, would you amend the death certificate? You can keep COVID in box A, but in box B, I need to have medically associated to the cancers. As long as I have the cancers on the death certificate, then that allows the elevation for line of duty death based on what the state pension system would be looking for. So he said, you find a doctor that knows how to amend the death certificate, and I'll amend the death certificate. It took me another 14 calls, and by the grace of God, and I believe truly that was a divine intervention, that I was able to identify a physician at Vassar that looped me in to be able to amend the death certificate, and I got the death certificate amended, and now James has been recognized officially as a line of duty death. His name is on the wall at the police academy. His name is on the wall up in New York State at Empire Plaza. And last May, his family went down to D.C. for the reading of the name at the Capitol with the National Police Memorial. Wow. I've had to do that at least another dozen times for other responders. And this is the information that most people don't know. And that's the information that also the responders need to know, that when I loop in, when I do outreach and I have the wives sitting with me when I'm registering in the program, that's the medical information. And that's the dark conversation, unfortunately, that I have to have. That if there's any emergencies, if your husband or if your wife, if she's a responder, and they wind up in the ER, they wind up in urgent care, you have to call 911 and EMS has to come to the house. I need to be notified because there's critical medical information that has to be relayed to those medical folks as well as the physicians, so in addition to for benefits that would be related to, even if there are pre-existing conditions, especially if they're World Trade Center conditions that are certified by the World Trade Center Health Program. So what the colonel is speaking of is, but I was successful with that, and I've had to do that for other agencies, including the NYPD, to have members of the department recognized as a line of duty death. Had I not done that and not had the information available to me to be able to speak to the physicians, those members of those departments, including our own, would not be recognized as a line of duty death.
Thank you. Great work, Jeannie. That's awesome.
What might be an incentive for people who haven't joined up is to make them aware of the fact that there's a $10,000 insurance policy from the World Trade Center program that covers the death from cancer of any sort. Did you know that?
From which benefit is that, sir?
The one we're in.
Oh, the victim's compensation?
Yeah. There's a $10,000 life insurance policy. If you die from cancer of any type, your survivor gets $10,000.
Is that the September 11 Victims Compensation Fund registration?
I believe so.
Okay. There's more of benefits than that. There's the economic and the non-economic awards. It's much more than $10,000. But if there is a life insurance policy for the economic award, if someone were to die of a 9/11 related illness, and that's basically a pulmonary illness or a cancer right now, because those are the two primaries. There are awards, but there is a life insurance offset for the death benefit. But let me explain it to you. So the victim's compensation has two parts, economic awards and non-economic awards. You must be registered in the World Trade Center Health Program and have the official correspondence for a certification for those illnesses. Right. The non-economic awards range from $10,000 to $90,000, 90 being the max, mostly for the COPD. Basal cell skin cancer right now, the number one cancer in the 9/11 population. Prostate cancer number two. Basal cell skin cancer is a $90,000 award, and then any blood or organ cancer, or the awards are as high as $250,000, and they are non-taxable. That is just for the illness itself. It's not a lawsuit. We're not suing anyone, and we always have the eligibility to go back to file an amendment for the non-economic award for the medical conditions only. The economic awards is anything out of pocket from the day we get sick up until the day of death, which means when I have construction workers in the locals, that if they don't go to work, they don't get paid. So if I have a construction worker that's out sick for 3 months in active treatment at Sloan and is not getting paid under the economic award for the victim's compensation, there's the eligibility to file a claim for reimbursement for wages or earnings that he did not make had he not been sick. If we die of a 9/11 illness, and again, it must be a covered condition, which is a cancer or a lung disease or anything medically associated to, and it must be on the death certificate. In regards to that correspondence, there's a $250,000 death award. It's called the wrongful death claim. $100,000 to the spouse, $100,000 to dependents or anyone that you claim on your tax return as a dependent, and all of the funeral expenses are eligible to be reimbursed. They are also non-taxable. The only thing is, with the legislation, when the Zadroga bill was signed for the victims' compensation, if families have life insurance policies, they use that as an offset. So if I have a detective that has a $500,000 life insurance policy and dies of a 9/11 illness, and there's the $250,000 for his passing, the $100,000 to his spouse, and the reimbursement for the funeral expenses, including the funeral home and the celebration of life. Well, the life insurance policy is higher than the wrongful death claim, so they use that as an offset. And a lot of folks don't know that.
And which programs are they associated with, of those that you mentioned?
So that's the September 11 Victims Compensation Fund is federal, and that's overseen by the Department of Justice. And the World Trade Center Health Program is federal, and that's overseen by NIOSH, the National Institute of Occupation Safety and Health. So those are the two federal registrations under the James Zadroga Health and Compensation Act that was signed in 2010 by President Obama that now have an open filing until the year 2090.
So there's quite a few benefits out there that people are not aware of.
Many benefits. There's scholarships that I can provide that are from state, federal, and private schools. There's the First Responders Children's Foundation that now is for any responder. You don't even have to be a 9/11 responder, but there's the First Responders Children's Foundation that also has scholarships and other benefits and resources for grief counseling, if you will, for the children as well as for the parents. So benefit-wise, there's a plethora of information out there that's not provided, and that's why the outreach that I do, that it's not just for the registrations, but it's the education side and looping them in with with benefits that they're eligible to receive.
So, Jeannie and Colonel, today's politicians, everyone who's in place, the governor, the president, the mayor, do you think they're doing enough for first responders today, and also their widows and children and survivors?
In my opinion, not even close. It's unfortunate. I had the pleasure of serving with George Pataki for pretty much his whole term, and his relationship with law enforcement was incredible, just unbelievable. I mean, we then went through some changes here in the state, and I don't think, other than Rockefeller and Pataki, I don't think we've had a governor that was so pro-law enforcement ever before. And it's not because Pataki went through 9/11. Of course he did. He was a main factor here. But it's just that somehow the politics have changed so badly that police officers are looked down upon. Right. I mean, it's hard to deal with. I mean, my heart goes out to anybody now that's still in the police departments and putting up with what they have to put up with today. I mean, when I hear that NYPD wasn't even allowed to carry batons anymore, I mean, think of how dumb that is, really. I mean, you don't want people getting shot, but those batons you guys know more than anybody how effective they were. And now we see cops being kicked in the head, and then the gang immigrants that are parts of these things are released the same day sometimes. It's just nuts that the country has come to this. I mean, 9/11, like we talked about before, Congress came out on the steps to sing God Bless America. I mean, as a group, they had to be out there with bats hitting each other. I mean, it's just something has to happen to bring this country back around to patriotism and respecting each other, because we've gone adrift. We really have, and that's scary.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Jeannie?
So I feel the same as the Colonel. Is there the farther away we get from September 11th, 2001, the less that there is even a distinction other than those of us that really were there, that know what it was like to be there, to keep that memory and never forget. Can things be more positive in that respect with elected officials? Yes, but again, the farther away we get from the date, the less that people are involved in anything.
Well, we had Peter King on the show a few weeks ago, and he told us what a difficult time he had in Congress to get it through, particularly with the southern states. He mentioned specifically the senator from Texas. And he said that he would rather drink cyanide than to have anything to do with him, because that senator was very much against it, thinking it would be a scam, that people would be taking advantage of the program and they weren't really sick. It was Ted Cruz, by the way. So Peter King said he would rather drink cyanide than have anything to do with Ted Cruz because of that. And it took him a number of years to get it through. The local area politicians here got it through. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't an easy job. So, it's a tough situation.
Walking the halls of Congress, I did not do that, but Matt McCauley made dozens of trips with John Field and the Feel Good Foundation. And from what I understand, there were elected officials in other parts of the country that said that's a New York problem. It has nothing to do with my constituents. So we were able to identify that there were responders from every electoral district in the 50 states of the Union except one, and be able to counteract that opinion that it didn't apply to them, to say, well, these are your constituents that vote for you. They came to New York City to support the rescue, recovery, and cleanup operations. And if you don't sign the bill, then these folks will be made aware that these are benefits that were provided to them and their families. And that's the only reason, part of the reason why the bill actually got signed. It was not something that was done easily. It took a lot of lobbying to get it there.
Very interesting. First of all, I can't believe it's the 23rd anniversary coming up in 2 days for 9/11. I mean, I remember the 10th anniversary like yesterday. Mm-hmm. But as you said, Jeannie, the further we get away from 9/11, it's just people forget. People forget, and we can never forget. But any last words on the anniversary coming up now in 2 days?
So I just wanted to add, we talk about New York City, but the Pentagon site and Shanksville are added to these registrations as well. They were not initially signed with the legislation when the bill was first signed. So I did go to Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and conduct a lot of outreach with the Somerset Fire Department, Shanksville Fire, the state troopers, the FBI local office, and a lot of the other responders that volunteered. Pentagon is also included, so it's now New York City, the Pentagon, and Shanksville for the 2 federal registrations that have been for folks that are eligible to register in the program and the Victims' Compensation Fund.
And did you get a good response, I'm sure? I'm sure you got a good response with that?
Yes.
Yeah. Colonel?
Well, thanks for what both of you do, Kevin and Ed, keeping people engaged, because that's important. And having Jeannie here, I mean, I don't know anybody who's got more basic knowledge about this than she does. And it was a lucky day for me back in 2016 when I found that I was in the wrong program. And Anthony Williams introduced me to Jeannie, and we've been close ever since. And we need to continue this type stuff. We can talk more offline, obviously, but we have to take care of the people that are still suffering, that continually getting turned down and sent to IME after IME. Now, that's independent medical exams to go through, because it's torturous. It really is. And it's different for state employees than it is. We don't follow the federal guidelines for some reason, which are very simple. That it's presumptive evidence that if you spent the minimum amount of time there, it's processed as such. But state police, not just state police, state employees in general have a different goal to meet here. And even once you are approved, it doesn't end there. The retirement system is so far backed up that I know people that have finally been approved after 5 or 6 years of a battle, and it takes 3 more years for the paperwork to get done in Albany for them to get their benefit after that. So, I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done. There's politicians that have to look at this and should focus on it so that it gets done properly, and the state employees get treated as well as city employees and federal employees, because we all work the piles together side by side, hand by hand. Right. So it's just not right that they don't get the same ability to end this for them and for their families. But we look forward to 9/11 as we always do. It's a solemn, sad time, but it brings back a lot of people we haven't seen for quite some time. So it's a good feeling in that regard.
Jeannie, if there's anyone else, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there are medical conditions that are not covered that we discussed in another podcast, and you had Kathy Hansen from, Kathy's married to Mike Hansen from ESU. The importance of being in the World Trade Center Health Program and the registration is you don't have to be sick, so it is a monitoring program. Mount Sinai, NYU, Northwell, Winthrop, Stony Brook, and Rutgers in New Jersey are the New York proper providers of the World Trade Center Health Program. There's the national program. So if we have folks listening to this podcast, if you will, that are outside New York City proper, there's the national provider network. So we identify a provider based on the zip code where they live. Now, medical conditions that we're seeing spike in the 9/11 population that today are not covered by the World Trade Center Health Program for benefits, medical benefits, and also the victim's compensation, are neurological illnesses like neuropathy, loss of feeling or numbness in the hands and feet, Lou Gehrig's disease, Parkinson's, and MS, just to name a few. Second is AFib. We are seeing spikes in heart disease in the 9/11 population, in addition to autoimmune diseases, lupus, gout, Hashimoto, the number one right now, rheumatoid arthritis. Last but not least, sadly, we're seeing spikes in onset of dementia and Alzheimer's. Now, these illnesses today are not covered by the program. However, two illnesses have been officially petitioned by Dr. Jackie Moline and other physicians. That Dr. Jackie Moline is the administrative physician, oversees the program with the Northwell Health System. They have petitioned officially to Dr. John Howard, who was appointed by Congress to oversee the World Trade Center Health Program that's with the CDC, and NIOSH is heart or cardiac illnesses and autoimmune diseases. So there is strength in numbers. So the more of us that are registered in the program, the more of us that report these medical conditions, even though they are not today listed as being eligible to be certified, means that it makes it easier for us to petition to have them added in the future. And that's the critical piece of that as well. And because of what we know scientifically and medically, heavy metals do cause neurological illnesses. There are studies to suggest that heavy metals like mercury, lead, that were never recovered at the site but were pulverized, just like glass and fiberglass and silica and lime and asbestos, just to name a few, were also at the landfill, which was just as toxic. And there was methane gas coming up out of the ground at the landfill, and there was no proper level of personal protective equipment. And don't forget, we all ate down there. And all the vehicles that we drove, whether they were department vehicles or they were your own personal vehicles, are a secondary exposure. It's in the air filter, the headliner, the engine block. So there is a eligibility for anyone that was driving, cleaning, repairing, or maintaining as a vehicle maintenance worker to be registered in the program as a responder, which means that in the state police up in Tube G, when I did outreach for AMI, those are their mechanics, just like we did with NYPD, with CRS, and they have a location in Queens and Brooklyn. Those mechanics that are contracted by agencies that were cleaning or maintaining vehicles that went south to Canal Street that were contaminated have the same availability to be registered in the program and covered for those medical conditions in addition to the Victims' Compensation Fund. That is a ripple effect of people that don't know that the vehicle being a secondary exposure also allows them. And in Tube G, they're 186 miles away from New York City. I have two of their mechanics that were diagnosed with cancer that I registered in the program, and they never stepped foot in Manhattan. It's just from the secondary exposure for the state police cars that were doing traffic posts and escorts and vehicle checkpoints and so forth that went back statewide. So that's nationally as well. So that's a lot of information that sometimes you won't read on the website, you won't get in the newsletter, but that's the intimate information that a lot of folks that don't know need to also understand is the eligibility is expanded for the secondary exposure from vehicles. I wanted to say thank you from my heart to you, to yours both as well, and to the Colonel for the warm embrace always, from not just from the Colonel, but from the state police and from you, Kevin, and Captain Mamet, that without you and this platform and getting the word out, I know I've received calls even after the first podcast that we did and then the one I did with Kathy, that you're saving lives. You're still doing what is in the DNA of all of us in law enforcement, is to help those that need help. And it's not just, the survivors, people who live, worked, and went to school, but our own active and retired members of the service. And right now, the retiree population is a larger population than the guys that are still working in our departments. So I wanted to say thank you from my heart to yours for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Colonel.
Let's hope that this podcast will be widely disseminated and that many people who haven't heard it before will listen and get in touch with you. Do you mind putting that out on the the air how to reach you?
So you can reach me on my mobile is 516-307-7965. That's my mobile number. You can text me on that number as well. We have a website, Matt McCauley, who I work with at Turkenheath and McCauley. We have 911outreach.com. You can go onto the website and contact us there as well. It's very personal to me. This is not a job. It's very personal. So anyone that needs help, if you know anyone that even has passed away and there's any questions, there's the possibility based on their exposure that there could be an elevation of a line of duty death benefit in addition to the victim's compensation or the recognition that they deserve as far as the honor and dignity. You can reach out to me for that as well.
Captain?
Well, that's great. And I'm very pleased that both of you are here. This is something we will never forget, and we will probably do this again next year.
Awesome. And thank you, sir, for feeding the troops, because without folks like you that came back as a retiree, and we had thousands of responders who came back from NYPD, Emergency Service Unit. We lost 4 team members of the department that day. So a lot of them came back as well to work at the site, just like the fire department, the retired members of their department came back to search for their loved ones that were killed that day. But thank you for feeding the troops and being there. We appreciate you being there. And we're forever indebted to your service.
We were delivering the food, the top quality food, by the way, to the pile with push carts. And, the Tribeca Grill played an integral role in that. They actually brought in their chefs, and they're cooking up real good stuff. I would eat it every day.
Excellent.
I'd like to thank our guests today. As we come upon the anniversary of 9/11, 23 years and 2 days, I'd like to thank you for being here. It was a great session, and hopefully we get the word out to everyone that needs to be taken care of. Jeannie, Kelly, thank you so much. You do great work. Colonel, thank you so much. Dan Wiese, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.
And until next time, if you like what you hear, you can follow us on X at Cop Talk WABC. That's at Cop Talk WABC. Until next time,
and
God bless America. God bless first responders throughout the world. And God bless you. Thank you.